Well, okay. Welcome back to the Culture Coach podcast. I'm excited about our episode today. I really am. I think it's just a solo episode, so it's just me, but I think it's going to be a great conversation. And when I was thinking about this episode, I was getting kind of fired up about some things that are happening with people that I know that are just working for crappy leaders. And I was going to go off on my soapbox, but I decided that wasn't necessary because if you listen to this podcast, I know you're not a crappy leader. I know that you care about your people, and that's why you're here. You want to learn how to prioritize your culture, have an intentional culture in your organization. And I'm so happy that you are here to talk with me about it. I realize right now this is a one-sided conversation, but I do want you to know that I don't make money doing this podcast. I don't have sponsors. I really, right now, the purpose of this is to take my experience, things that I have experienced myself, witnessed as an employee, as a leader, as a CEO, as a VP, all the different roles that I've held over the last 30 years to bring you that knowledge that I have taken and created a framework for how to build an intentional culture. Just I want to share what I have learned so that organizations can do better. Because when I share some of these metrics with you, you're going to know, like, if you're struggling with your culture and that's why you're listening, because maybe there's some employee issues going on. Maybe you feel like there's too much drama. Maybe you feel like productivity is low. Your turnover is high. You're not the only one. So I'll share with you that a Gallup study released in January of this year in 2025, they shared that the employee engagement in the US has fallen to its lowest level in a decade. In 2024, it fell to the lowest. So since 2014, it had not been as low as 31% of employees being engaged. Only 31% of employees in the workplace today report that they feel engaged, according to this Gallup study that was released at the beginning of this year. But what's even more staggering to me is that the percentage of engaged employees has declined by 2% points since 2023. So in 1 year, we dropped 2%, highlighting that the growing trend of employee detachment is what they're starting to call it, from organizations is strong, and also particularly among workers younger than 35. That is not okay. That is our future workforce. And so as a business owner, a CEO, a leader, you should be concerned about this. Gallup estimates that low engagement costs the global economy in US dollars $8.9 trillion, or 9% of our global GDP. I've shared that number before, I think, in an episode, but that's the global economy, but I'm sure put it in your own frame of reference in your organization and what disengaged employees cost you, not just turnover, but lack of productivity, drama, that extra noise in the workplace, low energy, right? It's not what you want for your organization. And a study that was done a decade ago by Deloitte, so around the same time that the engagement numbers mirrored where they are today, they found that 94% of executives and 88% of employees believe that a distinct workplace culture is important to business success. So there was a high number of people that believed that, but a low number of engaged employees. And so what that says to me is maybe they weren't doing it right. So in this study where Gallup saw that the decline of employee engagement was happening, and over the last decade it's gotten worse, they've attributed it to four things: rapid organizational change, which every organization, including your own probably, is going through some type of change. With the onset of AI, it's just going to continue to change, right? There is no, I think a decade ago, we started saying that there's nothing more constant than change, right? And it's just even truer today. There's still the lingering challenges from hybrid and remote work transitions. So employees and organizations still struggling to figure that piece out. New customer and employee expectations, speed of service from customers and employee expectations, probably back a little bit to how they get work done and their expectations. Those younger employees, as I mentioned, where low engagement scores are even more heavily weighted on 35 and younger aged employees. And then broken performance management practices, which, gosh, we've been talking about that for way too long. So, if those are the four main reasons for declining employee engagement, and those are not things that are changing, rapid organizational change, challenges from hybrid and remote work transitions, new customer and employee expectations, those will always be there, and broken performance management practices. I mean, hopefully we can fix that, for heaven's sakes. But the other three, that is part of doing business. And so when I think about culture and when I think about giving you something that you could take away from this episode that you could implement today or tomorrow or start thinking about strategically, if you've been listening to me for a while, you know the 6 pillars of a Thrive culture, the 6 levers that you could pull to increase productivity, decrease retention, increase profit. There are 6 things that I assess when I work with an organization to determine where we need to put our time and energy. And so I'm going to run through those real quickly. They're on my website. If you've been listening for a while, you know what they are. But I think when we talk about these, I'm just going to call it the 3 things. I'm going to take the broken performance management practices off the table because I think that's another episode. But rapid organizational change, hybrid and remote work transitions, which in itself is a change, right? It's an organizational change. And then new customer and employee expectations. When I look at those 3 reasons for declining employee engagement and rising detachment, as stated by Gallup, I can go back to the Thrive Culture framework and see where we can make some changes that could help in those areas. So we'll start with tribal values. The T in Thrive Culture is tribal values. And so if your values are not working for you, if they are not tribal, then you are not doing it right. And you don't have core values. If your core values are not integrated across the employee life cycle, across all of those touch points of your employee, from attract, hire, perform, develop, and retire, if you're not hitting them in all 5 of those areas with your core values, then that's where you need to start. Number 1, hands down, period, full stop. Start with the core values. Now, there are some signs that maybe the company has a disconnect with those core values. And so if you're asking yourself, well, have we integrated them? Haven't we integrated them? Think about, does your leadership talk about the values? Are employees able to make decisions based on the way the core values have been prescribed? Because if they're not, they should be defined in such a way where it's clear how you want to behave, how you want them to behave when it comes to decision making. But if employees are struggling to connect their daily work to the organization's mission and purpose, there's an issue. If different departments have different cultures, leading to a fractured employee experience, you have a problem. If hiring and promotions aren't connected with values, you have a problem. So that is the tribal values piece. The second piece is helpful processes and systems. If you are going through an organizational change and you are not looking at how your processes are working today and how you want them to work in future state, that's a problem. The H in Thrive Culture is helpful processes and systems. You have to be looking at how your processes are defined in the current state and what the gaps are between current state and future state, where you're headed in this change. And that can go from that remote work, hybrid and remote work transition, right? What are your processes around that? What are your expectations? The R is a responsive listening strategy. If you are going through an organizational change, you need to have a responsive listening strategy. So you should be asking your employees how they're doing. You should be communicating the changes that are coming. You should be testing iteratively some of those changes and getting ongoing feedback. The I is inclusivity and belonging, inspiring inclusivity and belonging. And there is no other no other time for someone to feel more not a part of an organization than when you're going through a change. Someone is going to always feel left behind. Someone is going to always feel like they didn't have a say in the process. And so bringing employees along and helping them feel like they belong to the process and the change is critical. And same thing with hybrid and remote work transitions, right? Being able to think about holistically your employee base and who might have issues working from home. Maybe their workplace is not a good environment to work, or maybe they now have childcare issues or transportation issues, right? These are all things to consider when thinking about that hybrid and remote work transition, because after everything that's happened, to go back and say, well, we're going back to how it used to be. And I don't want to beat this drum too much because some of you have already worked through all of this, and I applaud you. But if you're still in the trenches in it, I just want you to think about the inclusivity and belonging piece. And the V is visible career and development paths. So the V in Thrive is visible career and development paths. And that means that you are clearly communicating where and how your workforce can move up the ladder, what development opportunities there are for them. In smaller organizations, you may not have multiple layers for them to get promoted into. And if that's the case, you want to have development opportunities available to them. And that means communicating that. A lot of times, the leader will put a development dollar in the budget, in a line item in the budget, and employees have no idea. Some employees know, some employees don't. So some employees are going to conferences, taking training, while others don't even know that that line item exists. So make sure that you're being fair and inclusive. And in order to do that, you need to communicate that those opportunities exist. And then the final lever or pillar in Thrive culture is the E, is empowering rewards and recognition. So especially when you're going through a large or rapid organizational change, ensuring that your employees feel recognized and, recognized in that the changes that they're going to have to go through, what it's going to mean to their job, and letting them know that you're aware and that you recognize the change and how it's going to impact them. And then letting them know when they do well, finding out how they like to be recognized, and then rewarding them. Obviously, bottom line, table stakes is paying your employees the market rate at a minimum. And that just should go without saying. So that's the Thrive Culture Framework. Hopefully, some or most of you guys know that. Hopefully there's some takeaways in there for you when you think about some of those reasons why your team may be facing low engagement or detachment. Hopefully that's not the case, but if it is, those are just some things to look into. And then obviously talking to your employees, right? That's part of that responsive listening strategy, is listening to what they have to say. And that can be just one-on-ones. It can be town hall meetings. It can be surveys. But make sure that you are staying in communication with them and open and hearing them as well. So that's it. Those are the things that you can do to help drive engagement and reduce detachment in your organization. If you have other ideas, I'd love to hear about it. I mentioned earlier, it feels like a one-way conversation, but I am opening up a culture call. It's called the Culture Check-in Strategy Session, and there'll be monthly calls. It's for CEOs and HR executives to partner with their peers to have more of this conversation around culture, understand what your peers are struggling with, share some of your own struggles, and get group coaching from me in how to address some of these specifically in your organization. So if you're interested, go to culturecoachwendy.com/strategy sessions, plural, and sign up today. It's free. There is no cost. As long as you are a CEO or a HR executive that's director and above, then you are able to participate in these monthly calls. And I would love for you to join us. I expect that they will be really rich conversations and have actionable takeaways. So that's it. I hope this gave you some nuggets to take with you today and look at across your organization and see where you can execute and try to improve that employee detachment in your own organization. Again, thank you so much for being here, and I'll see you next week.